Great, welcome. Today is Wednesday, November the 2nd, 2022. This is a regular meeting of the Pickens County Board of County Commissioners. It is a beautiful fall day with lots of snow on Aspen Mountain. I believe they started snowmaking last night. And we're going to start off our meeting today with, are there any deletions or additions?
I have none.
Perfect. And then we're going to open up public comment. Are there any members of the public? Oh, we have Mr. Ely joining us. Hi, John. Are there any members of the public wishing to comment on items that are not on today's agenda? There's no one in the room. We'll give people a few minutes if they are tuning in. And I'm watching this through the slot in the door to see if Ingrid's coming. I have invited the Pickens County Clerk to come in and give us a little update on the election.
Trouble to get her?
But she's coming in. But, I mean, she'll be here, but we can go ahead with commissioner comments. So I'm going to close the public comment part of our agenda, and I'm going to bring it back to the board for comments. So who would like to kick it off?
Well, I just want to encourage people to vote.
Thank you.
That we have only a few more days, and there are people here serving us as volunteers and doing an amazing job in the building here. And the drop box here, and let's see, BOCC, and where's the other drop box?
We have a drop box here. We have one at is the one at the Jewish Visitor Center open yet?
No, there's one in BOCC, right?
There's one in Snowmass Village.
And Snowmass. Mm-hmm.
And then there's the one out in front of our building, and those boxes are open 24/7.
And then next Tuesday, you can vote at the Jewish Community Center, not here at the administration building. So
Yeah.
keep that in mind when you go on Tuesday.
So hopefully Ingrid
Voting
will be
not
here to.
But please do vote. It's a really important election, and all the candidates need all of your votes.
And your ballots must be brought in. They should not be mailed because of the time frame it takes for them to get to us through the mail. And they need to be received no later than Ingrid. Ingrid, we are just kind of touching on it.
Oh, good. Better details from you.
Go ahead. We're giving you the floor. And could you introduce yourself to the public, please?
Yes, I am Ingrid Gruder. I'm the clerk and recorder, and we're busy with the election.
Yes.
The early voting and mail ballot processing. So we are early voting in the Roaring, next door, in the Roaring Fork Room in this building, through Saturday. Saturday's hours are 10 to 2. And then we will be moving everything to the Aspen Jewish Community Center, which, so we'll have early voting there on Monday, and then, of course, Election Day, 7 to 7.
Can you let people know where that is?
It is, where's that address? 435 West Main Street.
So it's midway down Main
Yeah,
Street.
yeah.
Okay.
So I think you turn on, is it 4th or 5th? I can't remember which way those go. We'll also have Election Day voting at Snowmass Village Town Hall and the BOCC Library. Not to be confused with Eagle County will be doing in their center over by Crown Park. But that's Eagle, that'll be Eagle. Pickens will be in the BOCC Library. It is too late for us to mail ballots to anyone, and we would please not mail anything back because it may not get here by 7 p.m. on Tuesday. So please use drop boxes if you have mail ballots, which are BOCC Town Hall, Snowmass Village, the Town Hall, and then right out here. We will also have drop boxes for mail ballots at the voting centers on Election Day. So if you happen to have one person voting in person and you've got your mail ballot, you can also drop them there.
And Redstone?
And then we will have Redstone. We'll have just a drop box, and that will be manned by judges all day, so you can drop your ballots up there.
Only on Tuesday?
Thank you. Only on Tuesday. Only on Tuesday. So,
If I needed to get a ballot or replace a ballot, what would I do between now and Saturday?
best thing to do would be either to come into our office or vote in person, but on election day, we will also have people that will register you in the voting centers. So there are those kind of three options.
Okay, perfect.
Yeah,
And then this building will be closed Monday and Tuesday for voting,
correct.
except for the drop box.
Yeah, I mean, our office will be open, but voting will not be here.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. And to the board, Kelly, please.
How many people have voted so far?
They are logging in the pickup we did from Basalt and Snowmass this morning. We should be right at just under 4,000.
Yeah.
So we have a ways to go because we're
How many ballots technically did we mail out?
just under 14,000.
Jeez.
And I think we checked back to 2018, and I think we received about 10,000 ballots. So
By now?
please vote
Or
soon.
Registration is-
Midterms are about 10,000.
Yeah,
Registration is like 1,000, 1,200 higher than it's ever been, right?
yeah. It's not as much different as I thought it would be, but we are having people register now, so I don't, haven't looked at a new number.
So, and I know people, and I totally understand, it's kind of a tradition or an honor to vote on election day. And I understand
like it.
that.
Yeah.
Yeah, but for
Yes.
people to understand that, the efficiency for our staff and because of the processing that is required now
Yeah.
of the mail-in ballot, we really would appreciate people, getting their ballots to either drop boxes or to this building, drop box, sooner than later, so that our election judges have time to process the ballots.
Yes, please. Yes, we'll.
What will you do if you have a late swell?
A late swell, well, we have backup judges for processing scheduled for the day after election in case we go beyond midnight, because that's when mistakes happen. So you want to make sure everything's good.
So chances are, we will be still counting ballots on Wednesday.
Depending on how they come through,
Yeah.
yes, we are keeping up and trying to make sure end of each day we have mail ballot processing that we're caught up, so that we can go into Monday and Tuesday.
Because
In
we
good-
know how
in
long
good
it took out the
position.
primary.
Yeah, and we had a huge swell that the right before 7 even.
Yeah.
So when we picked up out of the drop box, it was huge.
Yeah.
So that's
Okay,
what
does the board have
sent
any
us
other
into the
questions?
early hours.
Thank you.
Do
We
you need
appreciate
any
it.
more help, or are you guys all good? I know.
I think
Patty
we're
and
good. We
can't.
had a
I
couple
know.
of last minute thrashes of judges that couldn't show, but we've sort of moved people around, and as of this moment,
Well, I
We're okay.
intend to be an election judge for the next few elections,
all right,
and even beyond.
all right.
All right,
We will-
thank you.
We will
Thanks.
welcome you with open arms.
Thanks, Ingrid.
Thanks, Ingrid.
Okay, I'll bring it back to the board for comments.
Comment. Just yesterday, circling back to yesterday's conversation about the veterans and the VSO and whether we need one, more information, all that. I put the word out to a couple of veterans and heard back from one in town already, Charlie Hopton, who said he's definitely been sending people to the other counties because it just doesn't work to have a part-time VSO here.
Oh, really?
And so I will forward his letter on to the board, and that's his personal view. And I've asked him to share his mailing list for the other vets, because I really do want to hear from veterans on, how are we doing and what could we do better, and do we need to do anything, and all those questions.
Right, good. Thanks for following up on that, Greg. I appreciate it.
I just didn't want people, the takeaway to be that I'm against funding a veteran service officer if we really need one.
Okay.
So,
Kelly or Steve?
Well, commenting on the veterans situation, I have a good friend who lives in Newcastle who's a Vietnam vet, and he's very active in the Western Slope Veterans Coalition that has the office there by the Garfield Courthouse. So I think I will talk to him and maybe try to get some ideas from him on how we can do a better job up here.
right.
We also had a discussion, today I had my Regional Transportation Coordinating Committee meeting, and we talked for a long time about the providing transportation services for veterans, and talked about the situation with the veteran service officers in the different counties, and I told them how don't have a VSO right now, although we have some people who have applied for the position. So the people at Northwest Cog are aware of the situation, and that might help us lead to a better solution here possibly.
Yeah. And I saw that Sam sent us an email today. I haven't had a chance to thoroughly vet it, but in follow-up of our discussion yesterday. So he's on it, and I really, really appreciate that. So it's amazing the stuff that's coming through on emails these days. Whew.
So
So, yeah, go ahead, Steve.
one more thing. I discovered recently that the Mustang schedule has changed their schedule out of Glenwood. So just to forewarn people, if you are going to ride Mustang, make sure to check the schedule. The first bus used to leave Glenwood at about 7:30 in the morning
For Denver?
for Denver. Now it leaves at, I think, 5:15 in the morning.
Oh, geez.
Then there's another one. There are 4 buses that
There's
one
4
leaves from
buses?
Glenwood, the other 3 come through from Grand Junction. Fairly even intervals throughout the day, but there's one like at 10:40 in the morning is the second one. But my son needed to catch the 5:15 one, which meant he had to leave really early in the morning from
Yeah,
our house
yeah.
to get there.
How long is the ride on Mustang? Do they stop at
It's
Dale?
about 3. Yeah, you pull into the Vail Transportation Center to the Frisco. It's a real quick stop in Eagle. And then it pulls into Idaho Springs.
Yeah, right.
And then to the Federal Center in Jefferson County, and then down to Union Station. It's very comfortable, very smooth ride. You can do it has an internet connection on there. You can be working on business while you're riding down
I
there.
didn't realize they had 4 a day. And do they have 4 a day from Denver west?
Yep, there's 4 each direction.
Wow.
If you're gonna go at 5:15, hopefully you can sleep for the 4 hours it takes you to get to
So
Denver.
they had added some that started in Avon and went to Denver, but now they've tied those into the ones coming from Grand Junction to meet that schedule, and I think that's why they started the one in Glenwood so
they-
much earlier to coordinate with what they had already scheduled from Avon.
Do they start at the transportation center there in Glenwood?
It's at the West Glenwood Park and Ride is where they
Yeah.
go
So it's
by.
right
What's
off
the
the
cost
left
for a round trip?
For a senior, one way is about $14. I don't know
Oh my
what
gosh, you're kidding, that's all?
Yeah,
uh,
right.
it's a little
Wow.
bit more. I don't know what it is for the regular adult fare, but
That is a lot cheaper than driving.
yeah.
I can just imagine what a better ride it is. The last time I went up towards Eisenhower Tunnel, the road was so bad that I pulled over because I thought I had trouble with my tires. I mean, it was like scary. And then I went, and then I realized it wasn't just one lane, it was most of the lanes unless you were in the far fast lane.
There is one section that's
It
pretty
was
bad.
so bad, and I thought, people who do that, who commute over and back or whatever from, say, Silverthorne to Vail, that road, it's just ripping cars apart.
So another benefit, when I flew to Alaska at the end of August, I took the Mustang from Glenwood. Then I took the A train from Union Station to the airport, which happened to be free. It was the month of August.
Oh.
The fare was free, but normally it would be, I think it would only be like $6 or $8
it's not
for
that much.
for a senior citizen to go to the airport. I didn't have to deal with parking at the airport. It was so incredibly easy to leave our car here in the Roaring Fork Valley and just ride public transportation all the way to DIA. It was so convenient that
Cost
I
me
highly recommend it for anybody.
Cost me $150 to park at DIA last week.
Well, I did the light rail from Northfield into downtown, and it was great. I was going to a Rockies game, And it was, no parking, and it's a couple blocks walk through the hustle and bustle of people getting geared up for the game. And it was great. Once I figured out that I had to run across the train tracks to get to the other side to catch the train. I'm like, where do I cross this? The guy goes, you run. I'm like, okay. Yeah, I mean, there's a gate, but there's no overpass there. But in parking.
No kidding.
Yeah, not at the Northfield station. But boy, it was great.
I could bring it back to local transportation. I've been riding raft up and down the valley. Combination of riding my old bicycle down to the intercept lot, grabbing the bus to Basalt, getting on a WeCycle. I may have told you this already.
No, you haven't. No, you haven't.
But, WeCycling to a meeting, and then getting on the WeCycle again, and getting back in the bus and going down valley and back. And it's happening so quickly with such efficiency now. I've got to say, there's really no reason to drive down valley for me if I don't have to take a bunch of stuff with me.
Yeah, that's the problem.
And so it's Raft is doing well. Last night on Rafta, I took a picture actually because the bus was so full, heading out of town at 5.
Off season.
5:15. Commuter workers on the bus. I'm guessing it took 40 cars off the road at least. But just the number of people on that bus, it was packed, standing room only.
Yeah, I have a picture of Ruby Park of people standing in line, goes across the little park area there and back down along the building, waiting to get on the bus. And then by the time they all get on the bus, it's
Full.
standing room only.
Right.
And then they still stop and pick people up. all
I
the way
take it
down.
when I can, when I go to work at Mountain Greenery in Basalt. And the reason I do, besides the fact it's in the winter, it's much safer, but I like sitting
Up
so I
high.
can, up high, so
Yeah.
I can look down at the river going through Snowmass Canyon and
it's-
stuff.
it's so
Gives you a whole
relaxing.
different viewplane,
So much more relaxing than white knuckles on the highway.
especially going through Snowmass Canyon, yeah. Yeah, but it's great.
I'll just chime in. I would like us to hear from Rafta sooner than later and kind of pursue Steve's suggestion about how we might support free fare service, because I also imagine a lot of people are choosing to take it due to gas prices from here to
Yeah.
all the way down valley,
Yeah.
and
Well,
that it
Rich-
can be a
Rich
real benefit
took
for
it down
the
yesterday, so-
community.
Yeah, Rich wrote it, and we can combine it with our meeting about HOV. Yeah, so if we can get him here. We're also looking, I guess, setting up a meeting with CDOT, Greg, for,
CDOT
to
was going to
talk
do a
about-
tour of their property. And
this was a winter something. I'll talk
there are
to you
two.
later.
It sounds like we've got two
Yeah,
meetings set up
yeah.
with CDOT.
And I don't know
One's
if I can
an
make the
optional
first one,
tour.
but I'll talk to
Yeah.
you about it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Lots going on. We look at our schedules and think we have breathing room here,
Send a letter,
but by the time you get to the week, your breathing room is
They're going to get
sucked
back
up.
to us. Ashley's going to
So-
get back to us.
Greg, we could talk to them next week at the meeting about setting something up.
Yeah, we make sure you keep
If David's
Rich in
there,
the
would be
loop.
the best probably, or Dan.
Yeah.
Which mean? Oh, at Rafta, sure.
Yeah, we have next week.
And then
Hopefully
we
they'll
can
heard about it
s-
beforehand.
Yeah, and then we have to look, because between now and Thanksgiving, our work sessions are jammed so it'd have to be sometime after that, when we starting to lighten up
Right.
because of budget. So, okay, Steve, do you have anything else before?
Oh, I'm good. Thank you.
What
Kelly?
did you say about the schedule for Thanksgiving? I'm sorry, while you're talking about Thanksgiving.
Thanksgiving, we have, our last meeting is the 16th, Wednesday.
So the one scheduled for the 22nd and 23rd, we don't have.
We don't have that week. And then we don't have the following week because it's the fifth week of the month.
Oh, geez, really?
So we have Thursday and Friday are Thanksgiving holidays. And just the way the timing went, we moved our regular meetings up early in the month of November, so it freed up the holiday and the week after.
So the 29th, we don't have a meeting either?
Mm-mm.
Holy mackerel.
Yeah.
I'll just note the bears are still awake.
Did you have bear?
Friend's car
Oh,
got
really?
ripped up by
Oh.
them. Thankfully not mine. I'm pretty good about locking my car at night, and so are they, except for they didn't lock it early enough.
Oh, no.
So keep locking your doors and windows and take your pumpkins to the farm collaborative.
And we have had a bear in this tree last week. The bear was back up there hanging out. But the bears at my house, we still have the one bad bear, the double-tagged bear. And he's very, very sly. And he's very, very
He's
big.
got 2 tags. He's got to be sly.
Yeah, so, yeah, he knows his life, he knows his life is on the line.
My daughter is collecting pumpkins also to take down to the Schneegas Wildlife Rehab Center.
Oh,
So she's filling coolers with crushed pumpkins to take down for all their animals.
Oh,
We
well,
bring them to your house?
do you have room on your
I'm
bike?
afraid to tell people to bring pumpkins to my house. Oh, no.
I've
but-
got 3 pumpkins on my porch that,
She'll be collecting, I think, going down on Sunday, so she'll collect them on Saturday. I'll get.
let me know, because I'm gonna be heading down Valley Saturday, late morning.
Oh, you could drop them by if you want.
Yeah, I'll think
My
about that.
chickens love them. We have 7 tom turkeys who have been living at our place. And yesterday I was walking down, we have this crabapple tree sort of right where we walk down towards my house. There was a turkey in it, and this guy looked so huge in this little crabapple tree. And he took off and flew right over my head by about this much space.
Great.
He's gigantic. They are so beautiful. They're like
jump up
this
and
tall
catch
when
'em?
they stand up.
You just grab a
And
leg.
then the hens.
Farm report.
There's 11 hens, and they live down at the Flying Dog right below us. So it's an amazing flock.
Do
They're
they
really
still
cool.
puff up in the mornings to feather their, or is that just the turkey vultures that puff up?
They probably do, but
I
I don't
remember
know.
seeing them at the Crystal Island Ranch up in the cottonwood trees. And I'm like, why do they have those balloons tied up in their tree? And somebody goes, those are birds. I'm like, and they were these big round fluff balls.
I saw a raven all fluffed up this morning, but it's really, I don't know why these turkeys have taken to our place. It's like, 2 of them were in the garden this morning, so I left the gate
Free
open
food.
to get them out. And,
Yeah.
They're just so huge. They're so beautiful. They're really
Pretty
fun. They're
cool.
not afraid of us in the least. I can get to to them as far as I am from you, and they don't even move. They just keep doing their thing, and they're really fun.
No, that's great.
Yeah.
Any other wildlife reports? It's like the farm.
The
report. We
mice,
could
the
do a
mice
farm
are
report.
horrible. I don't know. If
And what
anybody-
about the mad cow?
Mad cow? What?
The angry cow.
The angry
Oh,
cow?
the angry cow. You would have to ask the ranchers up there
I
about
think
the
they
mad
moved
cow.
the angry cows to a place
The
of
mean cow.
solitude.
Like CP Burger. I think that's what
No,
it
I
is.
don't, no, I think they're in a calm zone, not a refrigerator zone. All right, anything else, Kelly? No. I just want to thank everybody for being here at the meeting today. And it is, again, it's just a beautiful day outside. And for people who may have turned in late, please vote. And please, the sooner you can get your ballots into the drop boxes, the better for the election judges to be able to process them instead of having this huge swell on Tuesday. Your ballot does need to be received no later than 7 o'clock next Tuesday, November the 8th. Do not mail your ballots in at this time. Bring them to one of the drop boxes, please, because I don't think the Postal Service can guarantee that they will get to the county by 7 o'clock on Tuesday. And if you need a new ballot or to update anything, you can come into the clerk's office here in the County Administration Building on Main Street, and you can be issued your first or a replacement ballot. So please, please, it's important that people vote. We've only received about 4,000 ballots so far out of about, what'd you say, 14,000 ballots that have been mailed out. So please, folks, that ballot sitting on your table in your dining room or, wherever, take a look at it and get it back. It's important to, it's your constitutional right to vote, and Pickens County supports a safe and secure election, so please, please vote. All right, we're gonna move to our next item, which is a consent item, single reading. It's the minutes of October the 6th, 2022 regular meeting. Does the board have any comments, corrections?
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes of October 26th.
I'll second it.
I have a motion, I have a second. Any further comment? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Thank you, Julia. Next item on our agenda is a confirmatory reading and public hearing of an emergency resolution of the Board of County Commissioners authorizing a SNAP outreach sub-award agreement between Hunger Free Colorado and the Board of County Commissioners on behalf of Pickens County Human Services. And I believe we have Sam Lancaster with us. He needs to be moved over, I believe, because I think he is in our. Yeah,
Under the attendees column
yeah,
from the top.
attendees, and he needs to be a participant. And Sam, I would just like for you, unless there's any specific changes, if you can just explain to the public what SNAP is. We're moving you over, Sam, just give us a sec. There you go. Okay, so if you unmute Sam, you are ready to go. Thank you.
All
There
right,
you
well,
are. Hi.
hey there. Yeah, so I can explain SNAP is a Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, and that is a federal program that provides not exactly a monetary benefit, but a benefit to eligible households that can be used to purchase food items at grocery stores. Eligibility is determined based on federal poverty levels, and in Pickens County or in the rest of the country, it's 130% of the federal poverty level, which is quite low. However, we don't have as much enrollment as we would like to see. We know that there are folks out there who aren't enrolled in this program, and it could help with food insecurity for their families. And this outreach work we're able to do with this grant is helpful in increasing that enrollment.
Great, perfect. And no changes from the first emergency reading? And the reason
Nope.
yep, sorry. No changes?
No changes.
And the reason it's an emergency is just because of timing for the need to sign this agreement?
Exactly. Yeah, they get their funding, and then the contract has to be processed by the end of the month so that we can pull down those funds that we've used the services for.
And I believe I signed it right after the first reading.
Yes, you did.
Great, all right. So this is a public hearing. I'm going to open this up to members of the public, either in the room or online, to comment on this item. If you are online, which I don't see anybody, but if you decide to jump online, it's a *9 to raise your hand. I'm watching, there's nobody rushing. And I see no one in the room who would like to comment on this item. So I'll bring it back to the board for any comments, questions for Sam. Seeing none. I'm going to close the public hearing. Bring it back to the board for a motion.
I'll make a motion.
I'll second.
I'll make a motion to approve the
Oh, well.
authorizing a SNAP outreach sub-award agreement between Hunger Free Colorado and the Board of County Commissioners on behalf of Pickens County Human Services.
Perfect. And I've got a second. Any further comments, Steve,
I
please?
do have a question for Sam. Would this allow people to use their SNAP privileges for buying food at farmers markets and from farm stands?
So these funds are specifically dedicated to outreach, but that is something that we're exploring with the Greater Mountain Coalition on Food and Nutrition Security. So that's called Double Up Bucks. We haven't really been able to implement that here due to cost, but we're looking at ways that we can supplement that program to make it more effective for folks to purchase through farmers markets or possibly through kind of co-opted CSA shares. That's something we're definitely exploring and how we can implement that.
Yeah, it used to be
Okay.
really specific for like breakfast foods, orange juice and milk and cereal and that kind
Yeah,
of
and
stuff.
the reason I ask is I'll be going to Rocky Mountain Farmers Union Convention in a couple of weeks, and that is always an item of discussion amongst all of the farmers who have the CSAs and farm stands and whatnot.
Yeah, and I think the other thing that's good to understand about the SNAP program, and something else we're trying to explore along with working with our local agricultural producers, is SNAP benefits can be used to purchase seeds to grow food as well. So we'd like to look at ways that we could incorporate food growth with folks who are enrolled in SNAP, so they'd have the ability to grow their own food too.
Well, that's great to know, especially since
cool.
we've got Seed Piece right here in the valley that has those hybrid high-altitude seed opportunities. That's great. Kelly, you had,
Yeah, I'm wondering, would this grant allow for facilitation between the farms and potential SNAP recipients or applicants? You know, would they be able to, I don't know, translate some of their information or train them in how to connect people to the SNAP eligibility application or anything?
Not this year, but I think if we wanted to explore that and write that in the following year, we do have some flexibility on how it's carried out from year to year. We kind of reevaluate that on an annual basis. Right now, what we'd have is 2 technicians who are dedicated to SNAP outreach and enrollment. They have the ability to take phone applications, which is really helpful. It reduces barriers, especially around transportation. And we've also taken a 2-page SNAP application that we created and had approved by Food and Nutrition Services and converted it to an online PDF format that we have on iPads. So these outreach and enrollment specialists can be out at food pantries and other community events and take those applications out in the community versus having folks having to come into the office. That's new this year with this program.
Oh, good.
Okay, thank you. Great. Okay, bringing it back to the board. We had a motion and a second, I believe, by Francie and Greg, so I'm going to call the question. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Thanks, Sam.
Thanks, Sam.
Thanks, everyone.
All right, next item on our agenda is individual consideration items, first reading, set for a public hearing on November the 16th. It's a resolution of the Board of County Commissioners setting initial airport rates and charges for 2023. Dan, thank you for being here. Thank you for the conversation from yesterday. And thank you for realizing that we had a lot of questions.
Sure, and I realize you may have more, so that's perfectly fine. Dan Bartholomew, Airport Director. I'm also joined by Jason Apt, who's with our financial consultant, Recondo Associates. And yes, we're here to for the first reading on the 2023 airport rates and charges. And I think what I'll do is, because you had a number of suggestions yesterday, I will have Jason kind of walk you through briefly the assumptions and then some of the changes that were made.
Perfect.
All right, thank you, Dan. Let me get my screen up here. All right, can everyone see the PowerPoint slide?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
All right, excellent. Okay, as Dan said, I'll just quickly go through the assumptions. Nothing changed here from what we had discussed previously. Obviously, the airport rates and charges run through a compensatory rate setting methodology. Basically, there's cost centers set up within the airport, different functional areas such as the terminal airfield. Expenses are allocated to those cost centers, and then rates are derived and paid by the airlines to recover those costs. And I should say airlines and other users as applicable. As far as activity assumptions, we've seen, or we're kind of estimating for purposes here that we'll have a recovery to pre-pandemic levels for the airlines. GA activity has exceeded 2019 activity levels. And as far as operating expenses, we are using the fiscal 23 budget from September. COVID relief funding in some prior years, some COVID relief funding has been used to offset rates and charges. Fiscal 23, we're not making any assumption of that regard. COVID funding will be used to essentially offset non-airline expenses, so other cost centers. And then just a note there about indirect operating expenses such as administration that are allocated to direct cost centers. Terminal cost center, I mentioned, this is how the terminal rate is determined. We have expenses, O&M is the operations and maintenance expenses, and amortization, small capital projects. That sets the terminal requirement. Divide that by the usable space of the terminal, and you come up with your interior space. Exterior space is a third of the interior space, and then a 40% premium for seasonal carriers. And then the revenue obtained is that rate times what the airlines are leasing from the airport. In the airfield, similar to some degree, expenses include operation and maintenance expenses, ARP expenses, amortization, and small capital projects. There are some credits as well to derive a net airfield requirement. And the airfield requirement is split to some degree between the air carriers or the airlines and the general aviation users. And those rates are on a landed weight basis. And so users will pay the fee based on their landed weight. Won't go into too much detail on this slide, just kind of a roll up of the airport fund as far as revenues and expenses. Just to note at the bottom, calculated or estimated cost per enplaned passenger. It's basically an effective or average cost that the airlines realize through the rates and charges imposed by the airport. So this slide here is a summary of different rates and charges. One thing very important that I want to mention, a change from yesterday. We talked about the 60-40 split in ARP costs, 60 to the airline, 40 to GA. That was a result of some scenarios that we had looked at. Currently, the airport is at 75-25 on the ARP cost. That's what it is currently for the fiscal 22 and historically. When we were putting the board package together for yesterday, that 75-25 was inadvertently switched on instead of the 60-40. So what you thought you were looking at a 60-40 split was actually 75-25. And so what you're seeing here for the landing fee for 23 and the GA fee for 23 is now reflecting the 60-40 split that we had talked about yesterday. But that is the actual result of the 60-40 split. And I should mention that is also the methodology, and these rates are what the airlines have seen. So no changes to what the airlines have seen. It was just kind of a misprint here on the slide from yesterday, and I definitely apologize for that. But it is corrected here. And the difference you can see is that whereas before we were showing an increase in the landing fee for airlines over and above 2022, that's now a decrease, and then now an increase in the GA landing fee, whereas I think yesterday we were showing a decrease. And again, that is because of that ARP split going from 75-25 to 60-40.
I need
Yesterday,
Wait,
you
wait,
kind of give a full.
Jason,
Yeah.
Kelly has a question here.
Sorry.
Yeah.
I'm not sure I'm understanding this correctly. When you're saying 75-25, you're saying 75 to the airlines, 25 to GA.
Correct. That's how it's currently done for the current fiscal year 2022 and historically. We had looked at some scenarios prior to yesterday. We looked at some scenarios, 60-40 being one of them, and that was kind of the, I guess, kind of decided upon or proposed scenario that we went forward with the projection of the 23 rates and charges. So that's where that 60-40 came from, and that's what the airlines have seen is that 60-40 split.
Sure.
And so that's now what you're seeing on this slide is the 60-40 split.
Did you prepare a 20-80 split based on our conversation
Yeah.
yesterday? Okay.
Yeah, so yesterday we talked about different allocations, and so this slide here will show you what the landing fee impact would be for these different splits. So again, the 75-25 is what you have currently and historically through fiscal 22. The proposed, for lack of a better word, proposed fiscal 23 split was a 60-40. So these are now the rates that you're seeing on that previous page. These are the rates that you saw on there yesterday, and these are the actual 60-40 rates.
And that's per 1,000 pounds, correct?
Mhm.
Correct.
Okay.
Yes. Yeah. And then 45-55, we talked about this yesterday. That's the O&M split between the airlines and GA, and that's based on the landed weight. So we kind of ran that scenario. Again, this is for the ARP cost, so kind of looking at a 45-55 split for the ARP costs, and then a 40-60, 25-75, and 28. So you can see what the impacts then are to both the signatory rate and the GA rate.
Yeah, Kelly has another question.
Sorry, a new question. Help me understand again how you calculate the landed weight. Is it based on just the plane weight or the plane with a full capacity? Are they calculated different for airline versus GA?
Yeah, so the landed weight will come in as a report from the airlines. They'll provide, Dan, you can correct me if I'm wrong, probably a monthly report, landed report. And that will be, the airplane plus, whatever load they had on the plane. And so, it could change day to day, month to month.
Yep. And GA is a little more difficult to verify because we don't get a report from each individual operator. So what we do is we have a system that tracks all the aircraft that land and or take off from the airport, and it actually takes a picture and sends a landing fee invoice to each aircraft operator. And so it's the type of aircraft that operates, and there's an average weight for that type of aircraft that they're billed against.
Average weight, including per passenger weight, as opposed to?
Yeah, it's sort of an average takeoff and or landing weight for that aircraft based on, so a Gulfstream 5 would have a typical weight to it.
Of what?
Of that aircraft.
What is the average weight? I'm just curious to
She
know.
wants to know how many thousands of pounds.
Good question. I couldn't tell you that off the top of my head.
Just curious to know how
Trivia.
these little dollars here what they actually mean in terms of an airplane landing at the
It's
airport.
tens of thousands of pounds, right?
I don't know.
Yes.
I'll look it up.
Oh, yes.
What's the weight range for a standard, like a private jet, corporate jet?
A small private jet can be under 12,500 pounds, which is sort of a delimiter in the aviation world. So let's say 9,000 on up, but a larger general aviation aircraft can weigh almost as much as some of our commercial aircraft that come in here,
And those
upwards of 50, 60,000 pounds on up.
So 50,000 pounds, that's 50 times this number then is what their landing fee would be.
Around
I'm seeing about
$100.
50,000 pounds. Maximum takeoff weight, 90,000. So,
So we're talking
$500.
$400 landing fee.
Okay.
So I have a question.
Thank you.
And looking, and I really appreciate these different percentages and the cost. That's great information. But for me, to justify changing this, to put more weight, no pun intended, on GA, I think we can draw the nexus between the 20/80 split based on the numbers of, how many planes are coming in from commercial versus GA. It's our understanding that it's about 20% airlines and about 80% GA. So for me, that would be a justifiable nexus. If they were to challenge that, we could say we base this change on the numbers of flights per each category. So I don't know how, or if we'd be questioned if we went to the 25, 75, 40, 60, et cetera, but that's the 20/80 jumps out at me as a good nexus, but.
Well, Patty, maybe we can offer you an additional metric here because we also looked at the number of responses for general aviation or private versus the commercial aircraft that come in here, if you'd like to see that. So we pulled out the last 2.5, 2 3/4 years worth of responses.
And you mean, ARF responses, okay.
Yep. So
What does that
again, this part of this comes down to the fact that this ARF requirement is a commercial service requirement from the FAA. If we were just a general aviation airport, one of our mutual aid responders would be able to respond to those incidents. Perhaps we would have firefighting capabilities on the airport, but it wouldn't be a requirement from the FAA to have it. It's the commercial service that requires it. So this breaks down sort of the number of responses we've had for not only commercial and the general aviation or private, but also the responses to the terminal, because those are part of the commercial service breakdown that we have. So if you, at the bottom, I sort of put together a number that is, this is all the commercial service responses we have. So in 2020, 67% of our responses, whether it was a warning light in the aircraft that was coming in that turned out to be nothing and it was just a false alarm, to somebody having a heart attack in the terminal, let's say. So any kind of response to that. So in 2020, 67% of our responses for our services was directly related to our commercial service. Commercial service activity here. 2021 it was 63%, and 2022 it was 57%. So just kind of wanted to give you a different look on the number of responses. I know the responses that tend to make the papers and, are tend to be more the vocal ones, tend to be some of the GA issues we've had, in the last several years. But overall responses that we do tend to be a little closer along that 60-40 split. But I just wanted to offer you that other metric too, because there's other ways to look at it.
Great.
Can I ask a question?
Thank you. Yeah, Francie had a question first, and then Greg.
So it looks like a United jet would be like 5 times empty the weight of an empty Gulfstream or something. So when you're talking, when you just make a delineation, whether it's 20/80 or 40/60 or 60/40, whatever it is, are you attributing the weight to the total? So we're taking whatever of the weight that lands on the runway, or are you talking about the frequency of flights?
This is an allocation of costs, and so the ARF operation incurs an annual cost.
Okay.
So what we're talking about is the allocation of that specific cost to either the airlines or GA.
Yes, but how do you determine whether it's going to be 60/40 or 20/80 or whatever it is? Or is that by
That's what we're doing.
how much the airport has to spend on these particular flights? Is that what you're saying?
Nope. The allocation that we're talking about is really just, kind of picking an allocation that seems kind of equitable
Policy more
and
than
justifiable.
anything.
That's what we're attempting to do here. And currently, as I said, the airport has historically used a 75/25 airline GA. For fiscal 23, what we've projected thus far has been a 60/40 airline GA. And now we're looking at options of, is that reasonable, or are there other alternatives that we should consider?
And we just didn't think this 75/25 was quite fair to the operators at the airport, given that, the majority, or at least more of our calls and responses have gone towards the general aviation side versus the commercial side. Therefore, we thought an adjustment was logical.
Right, I get that. I was just wondering, these percentage numbers we're talking about, you're not basing them on actual accrued costs to date. I mean, what I hear you saying is we are going to allocate our costs according to 40/60 or 60/40, whatever it is. But I want to know what kind of basis do we have for those particular percentages? Where are those numbers coming from?
I think
So-
it's more of a policy decision if we want to
That's
pay.
what I'm
Yeah.
asking.
So
Yeah.
I could maybe, let me summarize it the way I would understand it. The percentage of general aviation landing is like 80% of
Right.
the planes landing are general aviation
Right.
versus 20% commercial. But if you look at the weight landing is probably closer to 60% commercial weight landing on the runway versus 40% general aviation weight landing on the runway. Maybe, now that's how I'm thinking, maybe they came up with a 60/40, and you can correct me if that's not how you came up with the
That's what I was asking.
60/40.
Formulas, so
Well,
don't
I guess-
confuse the
Wait,
two.
wait,
I guess
wait,
a couple of-
Let me let Kelly finish this, and then you guys can respond to both.
There's two
Greg, that's
formulas
what
that really matter here for how we're allocating, and you can think of the proportions in each formula differently. So the airfield cost is one thing, which I think makes sense to allocate based on weight, right? So the total impact of the weight, 55% of the total impact of the airfield is generated by GA, even though 80% of the flights are by GA, they're lighter. So 55% of the total weight is generated by GA.
Right.
So that's one formula at a 45-55 split. This split is, what do we do with the cost of ARF?
Right.
How do we allocate that? Does it make sense to do weight or operations or
Response.
or response? So
Response.
those are sort of three ways and those are going to create different proportions in the
Right.
formula of how we,
And where'd you get the 55% weight number?
because they talked about it yesterday.
So you're saying that 55% of the weight that lands on the runway comes from GA?
That's what we're projecting for fiscal 23 and forward.
Okay,
yes.
that's what I was asking.
Because of
15
more,
minutes ago.
Even
that,
though 80%
right.
of the operations are GA,
No, I
they
understand.
have lighter planes.
Yeah, I get that.
Yeah.
but-
Okay,
Okay, so,
can I talk?
yeah, Greg, I'm giving
Been
Greg,
waiting very patiently here.
Greg, but I kept you in mind.
Thank you for keeping me in mind. Do we have any historical figures for the actual cost of the response? A response to an error light that goes on is probably much lower than the cost of a crash of a GA flight on the runway. And I'm just wondering, is that part of the, because we're talking about landed allocated weight, we're talking about number of flights. What about the historical cost of the response? And I'm thinking specifically about, the crashes we've had, and what has been the cost of those, and should that not be part of the calculation? Historical cost to GA versus commercial.
Honestly, Greg, I mean, for the most part, our ARF costs are sunk costs because we have to have that here anyway to satisfy the requirements for commercial service. So when we respond to something, most of the actual costs we incur through those, we try to forward on to the insurance companies for that. It's for costs as far as having the staff here, the vehicles, all of that. We incur those costs regardless of whether the incident happens. So for the most part, it's a sunk cost issue.
That's what he was saying yesterday.
Got it. Okay, so that the cost of being prepared is the sunk cost. The cost of the actual response gets hopefully reimbursed by the insurance companies
At a fair rate.
at some rate, which hopefully will not reflect what happens with healthcare.
And that sunk cost is due to the regulatory requirement to have this for the commercial service.
Right.
Got it, okay.
And believe what he said yesterday was, we're required to have that there for commercial, but not for GA at all.
Right.
Correct.
But we
But we still have to
can
respond to
choose the
GA.
allocation differently. The FAA has their requirement, but that doesn't mean we can't, and that's why we're having this conversation.
Right, I think we pretty much can make it a policy decision, so we can at some level do whatever we want, but we still have to be able to justify it in some way. And Steve has a question here.
So if there is a crash landing on the runway or a plane runs off the runway and it shuts down the airport for the rest of the day, there's a huge cost to that and lost revenue to us, in addition just to the physical extraction of the airplane and getting it out of the way and repairing the lights and everything that has to be done. Does the insurance company pay for that lost revenue, or it's just money we didn't get and it's tough luck for us?
Unfortunately, it's more of a tough luck for us situation. And the analogy I sort of use for something like that is, if there was an accident on Highway 82 and you missed a business meeting because you were stuck in traffic for that, you really couldn't go back after that individual's insurance company for that lost revenue or that lost business opportunity. Very similar in this
Good
case.
analogy.
So I have a question
Yeah.
for you.
But the other thing is the bad press we get when we have to close the airport, and I wish we could recoup some costs for that.
And the people
All
who
right.
don't come at all once they get pissed off.
Yeah,
I have a question then. So if we switched from the 60/40 that is up there, which looks like about $400 for, I don't know, a Gulfstream kind of thing, and we went to 80/20, that'll double theirs to $800, and that's each time they land or take off.
The
So
landing
we actually charge them typically to take off because the way our camera system has been forced to set up here and we're one way in, one way out, we don't capture every landing only because they may turn off the runway before they hit the camera.
Oh.
But because of the one way out, we capture every takeoff, and the assumption is if they've landed here, that at some point they're going to have to take off. So we actually capture every takeoff, but it's not both. It's either, but we count it as a landing, so it's one operation.
So one of these jets then might have to pay $800 instead of $400, which is like us spending 80 cents more at the grocery store. So it's infinitesimal to their millions, but it could save the airlines money, right? It would cut the airlines' expenses by a third, by 2/3. So that would be pretty significant for them and maybe a enticement to have better airline service. So
or to reduce,
in
'cause
addition
they
to
pass that fee on to their passenger tickets. So that would be the goal, the hope. Remember, we talked about that yesterday. Hopeless feeling or hopeful feeling?
yeah,
To be able to get the airlines then to reflect that in their,
reflect the savings.
yes.
Yeah.
Which would be very nice and we would be very thankful for.
And we think would be a great gesture of recognizing customers in this time of high inflation.
Yes. So, and we can spin that good for us towards the airlines.
Not to mention making it more difficult to fly your private plane in here by an infinitesimal amount, but a little amount.
That is really wishful thinking. But, so now the decision for the board is which one of these percentage would we like to see, at least for 2023, because we do evaluate these costs, these charges, these fees every year.
One additional thing, Patty, I should mention
Yeah.
here is, well, two things. One, we would need to, and we can do this before the second reading, is check with the FAA, because they do have some policies on what you can and cannot charge for airport fees based on the need. The fact that, this is a regulatory requirement for commercial service, they may push back on, charging this mostly to general aviation because it's not a requirement for them. The other thing is we could look into what's called a Title 13 challenge. I believe it's Title 13, Jason, if I'm not mistaken, from the GA community saying this is unfair. So we could be looking at a lawsuit if we tilted too much. I'm just throwing that out there as possibilities.
I have another question.
Francie has another question, then I have a suggestion.
So the costs that we're talking about allocating, are they completely separate from the terminal? So, because obviously the commercial airlines use the terminal and GA doesn't, so, and that's a huge expense for us. But so, this is without regards to the terminal, correct?
Jason, you're going to probably have to answer that.
Yeah, the cost, it's essentially like I guess you consider it like a cost center or department, however you want to categorize the ARF expense item. It's separate from, it is separate from the terminal.
Okay. And the airlines incur costs at the terminal as well, right? That GA doesn't? That's correct, right?
Yes, they pay you a terminal rate,
Okay.
a rental rate.
Thank you.
Per square foot.
So this would be sort of an advisory recommendation to you that you'd have to run by the FAA?
Between now
If
and
we
second reading.
significantly deviated from the way we do it now, we think that 60/40 is probably fair because, we can justify that fairly easily from both sets of numbers that the metrics we've showed you here. If we deviate too far from that, that's when we may run into some challenges, but we're willing to look into those challenges as well.
So my suggestion would be, because of what Kelly pointed out about the 55%, I think that's a great nexus to say where we're basing this on weight, the landing fee per 1,000 pounds. So I would suggest that the board think about the 55% based on that nexus.
But that's what
No,
I
that's-
suggested for the airfield allocation, not for ARF.
Right.
Two different
Oh, yeah.
line items.
We're not actually setting the landed weight allocation, this is just giving us examples of what it would cost based on reality.
Right.
So we're talking about just
So
the
we need to can we go back to that slide before?
We're just talking about proposed ARF of 60/40 or something else.
Yeah. But I like these.
And 60/40 is already a change from.
And this is the
what's been-
60/40 rate here, which increases GA by 19 cents and decreases the others by 10 cents, 0.08 cents, 8 cents, right?
Yes, every other airfield cost is based on the landed weight. ARF is typically weighted more towards the commercial airlines, that 75/25, because of the FAA requirement to have it. The adjustment we're suggesting is just adjust that ARF requirement allocation more towards the GA.
But in reality, our response
We have those two
expenses
fees we're looking
are
at.
much higher for general aviation,
The response.
correct?
Yeah.
Okay, can I make a proposal?
Yes, you can, please, throw everything out there.
I would propose, if you're gonna speak to the FAA, why don't we go back to them and say, how about 65/35, and if that's not gonna fly, you could go back to your 60/40, and we call that we aim for that.
And that's for landing fees, or is that for,
The ARF distribution of costs.
ARF distribution, is that what kind of direction you're looking for from us?
Well, I think the direction we're looking for from you is, are you comfortable with the 60/40, 60% onto the airlines for the ARF cost allocation, 40% for GA,
Right.
or are you looking for a different allocation?
Well, that's what I was gonna say, if you're gonna go speak with the FAA about it, inquire would there be any benefit to telling them we want to do 65-35? Or should we just go in with 60-40 and see if we can make that work?
I think we can justify the 640 just based on the
Got it.
instance responses we've had, and then weighting it slightly more for the airlines because of that regulatory requirement. If we start to go below that, then we run into sort of an unknown land, and we'd have to check.
Got it. Okay, I'm just checking to see how prudent you are and how comfortable you feel going in at 60-40 then. So I'd propose that we would do 60-40 and see how it goes.
I would like him to bring up the idea of doing it even more the other way. If it's just gonna be a conversation, I would rather him.
No, that's what I was suggesting.
But yes, but I would prefer that he go in with this, telling them that the BOCC would prefer it if we could charge more to GA than to commercial, and just see what they say, if it's gonna be a conversation.
I can tell you don't want to go in and tell the FAA you're going to charge more to GA than commercial without some kind of justification, or they're going to, and then we will get nowhere. I'd rather go with something sensible. Let's see how it goes this year, and then bring it back next year for further evaluation. I would like to see it, the percentages a little more leaning towards GA, but I think this is a start.
Kelly has her hand up.
Kelly?
The rationale makes sense to me. I think what I'm troubled with is that we have no sort of recompense for, the incidences at GA that are shutting down the airport.
Yeah.
A heart attack at the terminal isn't shutting down the airport, right? So I don't know if there's another place to think about this or another lever to pull outside of the ARF cost, but that continues to be like an absorbed impact that GA is not responsible for, and that's what I'm troubled with a little bit. So I get the nexus here and the justification, and I do like to keep things neat, but I don't know if you guys have any advice on a different way of which we get to assess that impact.
I have a suggestion about
Or is
that.
this the way?
How about for this next year, we keep track, because I don't think we have those numbers, some kind of track
have
of
those numbers.
how many times, what the cost, the length of time the airport was shut down, how many commercial flights were canceled. So if we cut, so that next year we'll have that information before us to really look at those numbers. I mean, I think we know what those numbers are gonna be, but I think we're gonna need to have something in front of us.
Sure,
Francie?
we can do that.
Okay, thanks.
Is there a risk involved with suggesting something more draconian than 60-40?
With the
Because
FAA.
when we're talking about the numbers, the actual money amounts and the impact on the private jets, it's minimal. So I'm wondering, do you feel like it's risky to go to the FAA and recommend something stronger?
That may shut
Honestly,
down any conversation.
Yeah, I don't know if it'd be necessarily risky with the FAA. I think it's more risk on the GA community to come back and try to sue us.
I'm sorry, what was the last thing you said? Oh,
I
that
think
GA
the
might
most
sue you?
risk-
A file of section
God.
13, is that what it is?
Title 13.
Title 13, yeah. We've been there, done that before.
Neely's got his hand up.
And for me, it's a lot too, if you go in, you want to smoothly go in, even with FAA, and, because that may just close the door right away.
Well, that's what I'm asking.
Yeah.
John's got his hand up.
Yeah. John Ely, please.
I just want to reiterate in a different way what Dan just said. You simply cannot have a discriminatory fee. The fees need to be based upon a rational basis. They need to be based upon the demands on the facility in order that the facility be self-sustaining. So to make a statement, Francie, like that you're going to simply charge GA more because it is going to clearly be found discriminatory. It will not fly, and it won't be necessarily on review or consultation with the FAA. They don't review and approve our fees necessarily. They respond to complaints if one is made to them, or we respond directly if one is made against us. So I don't think we want to go that direction at all. If you want to analyze data as far as say response cost from the ARF or downtime experienced at the airport, you can do that. And you don't need to wait another calendar year. The fees can be modified in a shorter term than that if you want. You can approve what has been proposed now as is, and then ask for data be brought back to you so that you can take a look at that without waiting an entire year, because you can rely upon data that exists already based upon previous incidences going back. Heck, we can go back 10 years easily.
Yeah, well, I was thinking it would be justified by statistics. It just depends on which statistics you pick. For instance, Dan, can we see the slide of the response costs with the 47, 43%, 40 terminal, 43, what was that breakdown? It was like 43,
Cost types.
Right there.
so GA is 43.
That's the
terminal's
responses,
43.
but not necessarily the cost.
Well, and that gets back into the whole issue of, a lot of this is sunk costs. It's equipment we already own, staff we're already paying regardless of whether they're responding or not.
So, and when I suggested this next year, I'm just thinking about how busy airport staff is, and it might be easier for them just to start keeping track from here on than trying to go back and sort it out for the last year, 2 years, 10 years.
Well, he's got to have all that data. I mean,
Well, but I don't know the answer to that, and I don't know if they've kept track of it. We need to have the data correct, not just guesstimated data. So, Steve.
So, Dan, you must realize that you were talking to two former math teachers here in Francie and me. And to me, this is a calculus problem where you have three different variables that are going at different rates, and to find the optimum fee that you would charge for general aviation versus the commercial is just a complex math problem for us. And I think
Yes, it
that's
is.
what Francie and I both think, that that's the number we should arrive at. But we have to decide which variables are we going to be charging for. Like, is the lost revenue caused by poor landing techniques by general aviation? Can we figure that cost into the general and attribute some of that cost to all of the general aviation or not? Maybe we can't do that, but that's the variables that I think are unknown to us that we're asking to try to and next year have it nailed down a little closer to what our actual costs are.
No, I absolutely agree with you. And, the unfortunate part about it is some of those variables may be difficult to actually quantify a little bit.
Greg, please.
Just thinking about regarding the additional costs, people discuss training, training for pilots for GA flying in, because I think we've had several comments that it's mostly pilot error regarding these casualties, the wrecks we've had. Can we add the cost of some sort of mandatory? I don't know if we can do mandatory training here. We can't.
No.
Okay. Could we put together a program that we could bill them for and tie the cost into this? Too far out. Okay.
Probably unlikely that we'd be able to do that for a number of reasons.
Got it. Okay.
We have a lot of discussion that needs to happen before we can create and enforce a pilot safety
So
GA program.
what's the question we're trying to answer
The-
here?
We're
then?
trying to decide on the fees in front of us. Do we go to 60/40, or do we stay, which is what's presented here? No, not the other one, there where you had, remember yesterday you gave us the 75/25, and today you've corrected it to the, yeah.
no, they're right. Oh, no, they're not.
Yeah, so that's the increase for GA by 20 cents. And we still haven't talked fuel flow costs yet either. So that's one question before us. Is that correct, Dan?
That's correct, yes.
Okay.
And we
So-
did evaluate the fuel flow just
Yeah.
well.
And then with the conversation we've had about what information, and John Ely is right, we could bring it back in 6 months, or we could wait a year. That, if you've got significant information 6 months from now, then you can talk to us about bringing it back then, or we can wait a year. We can decide that later. Kelly?
I just think for ARF, it makes sense to apply it by the response, right now, since this is the information we have, and to try and figure out how we would quantify impact for these responses, for future discussion, because it's not capturing it. So, 60/40 is fine, it's rational, it's demonstrated, 55/45 might be more appropriate, but that's just splitting sense.
Yeah,
here.
literally splitting sense. Okay, so I think we've got that direction.
So, yeah, and I just want to say I would go with the 60/40. I think we're moving the needle in the right direction, and I don't think we're quite there yet, but I think it sounds like it's the prudent thing to do, that we're going the right direction, and in future years, maybe we'll get it to where we think is the best spot to be.
Right.
Like
Yeah.
2080.
Yeah, and yeah, I feel about 20 cents better on this, but we'll see where it goes over the year. The other thing, so I think we're there, right, board, for bringing it back? Whatever you need to do between now and second reading, Dan. And then the other question, didn't we have from yesterday, was the 12-cent fuel flowage fee, or whatever you called it.
So this is a rather easy one. Jason ran the numbers on this one. An adjustment to the fuel flowage fee does not impact the landing fee. They're disconnected.
Right.
So it wouldn't raise the landing fee to raise the fuel flowage fee. It would just adjust the revenue that the airport gets from that fuel flowage fee.
And it's my understanding we're kind of in the middle of the ballpark for what other airports are charging, anywhere from like 0.8 or 9 to, 8 or 9 cents to 15 cents. Is that right?
Yeah, correct. Yeah, I've seen it anywhere from, in the low 20-cent range to 8 cents-ish. So yeah, we're even lower, a little lower than that. So we're in the middle of the ballpark.
Okay.
Uh,
But,
And do we have to find some kind of strange justification for changing that we have to?
No, not necessarily. It can't be something that's exorbitant. I mean, this goes over to the fair and reasonable cost. But then again, anything we apply to the GA side on fuel flowage fee, we also have to apply to the commercial side to be on.
everybody would be paying the increased fuel flow fee.
Correct.
Flowage, I like that word, flowage. So does the board want to address that, or are we comfortable with the 12 cents? Greg?
It seems that it's an economic question. If we charge too much, that'll incentivize them to buy their gas elsewhere. If we charge too little, we're leaving money on the table that we could be putting toward cost of doing business at the airport. I don't know how we reach 12. We don't have all the data on that. Would you make a recommendation? Are you recommending we leave it at 12 here? That seems to be what I see. I'm just wondering, it seems to me it could go up a little bit, but I'm not qualified to tell you how much.
That's a good question. It hasn't been adjusted in years. So, I mean, there is a rationale to be made to elevating it tad. But you're right, at the other side, are we biting ourselves at all for 1 cent increase per gallon versus the revenue we would get on the other side? Plus, not to get too far into this, but we do have a new FBO arrangement coming up a year from now. That may change the ballgame there too.
Right. If we disincentivize people from buying gas here, it means we're not trucking it in as much. So there are things to consider.
But it may mean more of the flights. They're coming here, dropping people off, going to get gas somewhere else,
And then
coming
flying
back and then
It
parking
costs a
there.
lot of money to land
Yeah.
and take off. I wonder if they would
But they
do
do. Nancy?
Has the increase in GA traffic made us have greater expenses in terms of fuel flow? Do we need more people out there on the ground every day?
That's all handled through the fixed base operator, FBO. So it's not an impact to the airport itself. They also own the infrastructure and operate and maintain the infrastructure for.
That's all FBO stuff.
They have their
That's
own
all.
fuel system.
So our flow fee is just on top of that. It's just, they do all of that, and then we just charge per gallon or whatever it is.
Correct.
And is this fee per gallon 12 cents or
This is per
whatever?
gallon, yes.
Would it make sense to consult FBOs on what they think this fee should be?
You know, I
They
did
say
sort of
free.
a cursory survey on various airports around the country, and we are, as Patty mentioned, we are right in the middle, pretty much.
Right, got it.
Steve?
I feel like the flowage fee would be one of the negotiating points in a new FBO contract with, that should be part of the proposals on the RFPs. And maybe we should just leave it what it is for now until we make a decision on the FBO lease.
Would it affect how much the owners of the aircraft pay per gallon? Or would FBO pay us out of what they get per gallon?
They would likely pass this cost on as a lot of times when you look at invoices for airports and FBOs that deliver fuel, that's a called out separate line item. It's sort of like a tax, if you will. So
And
it
that,
would-
yeah,
it
and
would-
that, sorry, Dan, that increase would also go to our local aviators, our local flights. So that's a savings that we can't waive for them like we do with landing fees. So it would be impacting EcoFlight who wanted to fill up here or whoever.
Now, in the future, we are looking at having self-service fuel. So that would offer an option to reduce fuel costs into the aircraft if people are allowed to self-pump fuel versus the full service only option we have now. So that's something to consider too.
And we could limit that to the small local people fueling. I mean, we'd have some flexibility there.
I have questions about
Yeah.
that.
Could we add a, say, 5 cent per gallon surcharge that we could then apply that 5 cents toward sustainable aviation fuel, an incentive? Could we use this as an incentive to get them to move more, the industry is what we're trying to move toward more sustainable aviation fuel? Is this one of the levers that we could employ?
How would we do that?
Well, we say we're gonna charge a 5 cent surcharge for regular fuel, and that 5 cents will go toward
But not towards the more,
sustainable aviation fuel. If we
I
dedicate
don't know if we
it to
can do that, Dan?
That might be a tricky one, because that would be
They're mixed
probably
up.
viewed as a tax towards a sustainable aviation fuel, and that one hasn't really been tested yet in the aviation industry.
I'd love to put a carbon tax on the fuel flowage fee.
well, if the range is from 8 to 20, I would recommend that we hit the middle of it and go up to 14 cents. That's dead in the middle, and I don't know why we wouldn't be more at the upper end, but trying to be conservative so I don't get chastised by our attorney. I would
Rich has his hand.
recommend that we hit the dead center.
His hand is in the middle of the yellow
range.
leaves. So, Rich, you have your hand up in the middle of the beautiful aspen yellow leaves behind you, so please.
I kind of noticed that. I may have to change my background. Again, I guess my question again kind of leads to yesterday's discussion. We do have the RFP out for the FBO, and we have open-ended a lot of things within that RFP. And I'm just wondering if it wouldn't be wise for us to see what comes back with that, because there could be opportunities for FBOs to present things that might have to do with fuel. Because they manage, they operate it, it may be a better conversation to have with the board once we get back some proposals and see if we need to do something differently there. It's a suggestion. It's just that
I like that.
we're not too far out from getting some proposals back after the first of the year, to start taking a look at that.
And we could bring this item forward at any time in the year too, Dan, like we could the others. So in 6
Yeah.
months, we could come back and say we want to increase the fuel flowage fee.
Sure. Yeah,
Okay.
it doesn't need to be done annually. It can
Okay.
be done at any point.
So
It
how
won't
about-
be restricted by a contract with the FBO?
Fuel flowage fee is a completely separate item. That's sort of like a line item, if you will. It's not a negotiated item with an FBO. It's an airport-only item.
All right, so right now I'm just seeing go to the 60/40. Is that? I've got so many numbers running through my head after the last couple of days. But that's what I was hearing from the board. Okay. So I think we're good on that. And I think, does that answer all the questions we brought up yesterday?
And then you'll get back to us regarding, well, we'll hear back from Rich regarding the FBO RFPs, responses, and we'll find out. how it
That's
flies
somewhere
with the
further down the
FAA
line.
conversation with the ARF.
Yeah, that's a whole separate process somewhere,
Yeah, except that it does affect the fuel flow recommendations that,
but we
I
can bring
like
that back
Francis.
anytime.
I like Francie's proposal to bump it up to 14. It's not the end of
I
the
would
world.
rather wait till we see what the RFPs might bring back and maybe use that more as a negotiating tool on that. And in 6 months, we can always, if we're not seeing anything come through those RFPs, we can always increase. We just need to keep that flagged so we know it can come back. Kelly?
Where does this revenue, how does this revenue go back into the airport?
Really, this revenue essentially goes back into maintaining the airfield. So it's a break even. These rates are based on a break even of what it cost us or is projected to cost us in 2023 to maintain our airfield.
So if we charged more here, we would reduce what we collected through the other calculations.
It depends on what calculations. So these are in various cost centers. So what this is just applied to the airfield.
Right, so
We
that
can't
airfield
money
line item would look lower that we're charging back because we have more revenue from this
Correct.
use.
Well,
Okay.
I guess,
Not aware of that.
I guess just to clarify on that, Dan mentioned this, that the fuel flowage fee revenue does not get credited to the landing fee. So it's not circular in that respect. It is what would be classified as a non-airline revenue. It's an aviation revenue, but a non-airline revenue. And so basically it's just, it's just added revenue for the airport with the stipulation, of course, that it's used for, airport means. So it's, to revenue to help, maintain and operate the airport. And that's what the FAA is concerned about is, as John had mentioned, just, the fair and equitable charging of rates and charges, but also to make sure that you're not diverting revenue to other things than airport operation.
So then what is the proportion of fuel flow revenue that is being generated by GA versus airline?
What was that again?
I think it is. I think it probably is just a GA charge through the FBO. Isn't that right, Dan? Because I think the airlines probably negotiate their own fuel contracts.
They do negotiate their own fuel contracts. So what they actually pay per gallon of fuel is different than what the GA customers do, correct?
Okay.
Dan, can you speak up just a little bit when you talk? I can barely hear
Well,
you.
but our local GA will be affected by this 2 cent increase. So it's gonna cost our local people a little more money to fuel here.
But it lowers the amount of airfield revenue we have to otherwise generate to zero out our cost, right?
I
Correct,
understand what you're
but to be honest, it's quite nominal when it comes to I think, Jason, you sent me some numbers yesterday on what the fuel flowage fee numbers were, and it was.
Yeah, we kind of backed into a calculation and it came out to about 50,000 or so to add a cent onto it.
I see.
And our local GA does not pay a landing fee, is that correct?
Correct.
So,
Locally based, right?
yeah. Okay, so where does the board wanna go on this flowage fee?
I'd go to 14 based on that understanding.
And since it hasn't been changed in many, many years, I think that doesn't seem unreasonable.
He's
Steve?
pretty conservative.
You've already got 3 to.
I know, but I just want your input.
I'd be okay with the 14. I personally would leave it at 12 until after we look at the RFP proposals. But it sounds like they're not going to be putting in a flowage fee in their proposals anyhow,
yeah.
so.
So, yeah, I would rather wait and see, but, seeing that it's 2 cents, I'll put in my 2 cents and go for it. So, okay,
It's just another way to help, incrementally lower costs that gets allocated to the airlines, which I would prefer to support doing.
now we need to, hopefully we
Scheme
can
of
have a better
fees.
conversation with the airlines about a lot of things. One of them including if we are able to reduce some costs, will they reflect those costs, towards their ticketing prices? Wishful thinking, I know, but it never hurts to ask. All right, so is that?
I do want to clarify, if I can, that the the fuel flow HB revenue does not impact the charge landing fee.
Right. We know
Or-
that Kelly's thinking it more that it helps to offset some of the costs of maintaining the airfield.
That, yes, yeah, it's revenue to be used to maintain the airport and airfield, yes.
Right.
But the airlines would not necessarily pay less because you're increasing your fuel flow HB.
It wouldn't directly affect it, but it's our understanding that you calculate what the costs of maintenance are, and then you allocate that according to whatever you do with that.
These
So that
proportions
each
we've
person
discussed,
has,
yes.
each entity rather, pays a percentage of the overall cost. So this would, even if it might be small, might slightly impact that large number that you then divvy up. Yes, no?
I don't,
So the operation and maintenance costs for the airport, for the airfield, are divided between the airlines and GA based on that landed weight. That was the 45.55. So any revenue that comes in over and above what is needed to operate and maintain the airfield can be used for other aviation purposes, like capital projects that benefit the airlines or GA.
Okay,
so it's a positive in whatever way,
but except it won't.
and
reduce-
it's not that big a deal
Yeah.
either way. So I think we're at the 60/40 and the 14 cents is what I'm hearing from the board.
Do you need a vote?
No, I want to make sure. Dan, is there anything else we brought up yesterday that we need clarification on?
No, ma'am, unless, is there anything additional you want us to research between now and the next meeting, I guess?
Between now and second reading?
Yes, ma'am.
If you think you need to run it by FAA, the 60/40, or you're having a meeting with the parties that be next week, I believe, the 8th?
Yes.
Okay.
Nope.
All right. So I think we're good here. And then, does the board want Dan to start looking at collecting data over, I would, incidents that occur, shutdown times at the airport, how many commercial flights may be affected during that time frame? I would like, Dan, if we could find a way to start looking at that data. And if you see the huge amount of data within 6 months, we can bring it back, or we can talk about that. Or you can talk with the chairman at the time, Francie, about that.
I wouldn't mind having you go retroactively a bit with that as well. I'm
Yeah.
pretty sure you have pretty good data on.
If you,
how
yeah,
many
and
incidents
you don't
and
want to
stuff.
overburden staff because we have so much on your plate already, but whatever we can work out, and, you and I and Rich can talk about it or whatever. Okay?
Sure, and yeah, hopefully going forward, we have no data. That means we have no incidents, so.
We're doing a lot of wishful thinking today, aren't we?
Mm-hmm.
All right, so we have in front of us, this is a first reading set for public hearing on the 16th.
All right, I'll make a motion to approve the resolution of the BOCC setting initial airport rates and charges for 2023 as amended during our discussion today.
Second.
Motion second, further discussion. Thank you, gentlemen, we really appreciate your getting back to us in such a short time frame. And we'll wait to hear from you on the 16th as to anything else that may have come up in the next 2 weeks. So, okay, I'm gonna call the question.
Thank you.
All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Thank you. All right, next item on our agenda is an ordinance of the Board of County Commissioners approving and accepting a deed of conservation easement for the 2250 Emma Road property. Paul, thank you for being here.
Hi, Paul.
Hi, it's been
And
a long time to have all
this is
five.
the historic property that, yes.
Yes, it is, and I was trying to get here early to get some maps going.
The historic birthplace of Larry and Brad Fight.
That's right. Yeah. So, again, my name is Paul Holsinger.
Were you
I'm
born at home?
I don't know if they were born on the property, but
yeah, I am the Agriculture and Conservation Easement Administrator for Picken County Open Space and Trails. And we talked about our program last afternoon, all the good stuff we're doing, and we've been really effective using our land use code to further conservation in our county, and this is just another example of that. It's a 6-acre portion of a 10-acre property, it really preserves an irrigated meadow, and it comes to us through the land use process for the owners of this property through their land use application, granting some entitlements through designating the property historic and getting site plan approval. We were able to get this irrigated land preserved, and I'm going to share my screen.
Is this the chicken coop property?
Yes, I believe
I call it the
is.
historically designated property.
The historically designated. So here you go. I think this map here does a good job of showing, why this 6 acres, while not impressive in land, it does fit really nicely with what the county has been doing in the Emma area with the Crown Mountain Ranch and Clark Conservation easements that we worked with Tom Clark, owner of Clark's Market, to get done. We've got some fee-owned properties, Shippey Open Space, Grace Open Space, and Emma Open Space, and the town site here. More historic properties, as well as historic properties at the corner here, which we also have a conservation easement on Emma Farms there. So there's a few other historic properties as well. And the way that this conservation easement sits on the land, you can see we've asked them to just carve off that irrigated meadow. It does ensure that those water rights will remain with the land. It'll always be an irrigated hay meadow. It's just good for agricultural viability of that area. And so we've drafted a pretty basic conservation easement to make sure that happens. We've also captured all of the representations those landowners made that they said they would do on that property. So if you have any questions.
Does the board have questions? Steve?
Paul, when we were on the site visit, there was discussion about whether they could build a pond or not, or operable pond for irrigation. So on the conserved area, could there be an operational pond for pumping out for irrigation?
I think where the board landed was we didn't want to have a pond on the property, so we commemorated that in the conservation easement. I know Sarah, the landowner's representative, is here. She could probably clarify, but that's how I understood it. So we took that representation and just applied it to our conservation easement. So there isn't, I believe there's no pond.
And we're still going to work on the apple trees, right?
Yeah, that is being preserved through a covenant. Perfect. Instead of the conservation easement, and we were comfortable with that. But
yeah.
There was also some talk about having to preserve the view of the saved buildings by taking out some trees, but we're not taking out trees, right?
Yeah, the conservation easement doesn't speak to those trees along there, but that's what I understood as well. Okay. I think there was some talk about, taking down the trees, but then I think we decided to
not take down the trees.
Let nature do her work there in the future.
You can still see the property really well with those trees there.
Yeah. Okay, so this is our first reading. We will set for a public hearing on the 16th, along with everything else in the world we're doing on the 16th.
I see John has his hand.
Yeah. Does the board have any other comments or concerns?
I just know John Ely has his hand up.
Oh, John Ely, sorry, I keep forgetting that you're here today. Sorry, John.
Patty, where else would I be?
Scotland
I
fishing.
Yeah.
Paul, I've noticed that the conservation easement has a watermark of draft on all of the pages. It doesn't matter so much for today, of course, because it's a first reading, but on second reading, the way this is set up, the language will be finalized upon the adoption of the ordinance, unless you want to continue it out. Do you think that the language is going to change? I just wanted to let you know that before we got up to the second reading, if you weren't aware of it, that's all.
No, I'm aware of it, and it is a draft. We just had some really minor language that we're still passing back regarding enforcement and some condemnation stuff. It's really technical and doesn't really affect the conservation values of the property. So I'm letting Rye and Sarah discuss that, but it should be wrapped up in the next 2 days here.
And Sarah, I know you're in the room. I know this isn't a public hearing, but you do represent the applicant. Did you want to come forward and say anything, or are you good?
I don't have any comments,
Okay.
so it's pretty straightforward.
Okay,
so,
great.
yeah.
All right, thank you, thank you,
Thanks,
Sarah.
Sarah.
We appreciate your being here.
Sure.
Yes.
Paul, would you remind me of what these people are getting in return for putting this land under conservation?
Ooh, that's a land use question. I don't feel confident that I can really speak to that. I know there was some TDRs being gained. They have the ability to expand the house, but I'm sorry, I can't really answer that.
Does
Maybe
anybody
Sarah
remember?
can.
Was it 2 TDRs or who? Anybody remember?
Sarah, why don't you come on up
Sarah's
and
coming.
have a seat with the mic? Is her mic?
I was brought on board just to help with the conservation easement, so I wasn't involved in the original land use either. But if you want to give me a second, I can.
And I can also bring that back during second reading if that's what
Yeah.
you'd
Well,
like.
I-
It'd
well,
be
you know, for the public as much as anything.
Okay.
absolutely.
Why don't we
Right,
bring it back
perfect.
to second reading? Is
That's
that
fine.
Okay.
Okay.
Sure.
Yep.
So
Easy.
there was in some concessions or some things because of the historic designation. I don't think it necessarily had to do with the conservation
That's what I
easement.
was trying to remember.
Yeah, it's a
Yeah,
different process,
That's
but
sort of what I'm thinking.
Yeah, that's why we cut the conservation easement the way we did, so that we could just focus on the conservation values of that irrigated meadow
And
and
kept it separate from the historic preservation.
yeah.
and I know there was a limitation on square footage that they agreed to, that they voluntarily agreed to, no
Yes.
greater than 57.5. The expansion of the brown house and the restoration of the original farmhouse
The inside of it.
and barn and chicken coop.
Yes. I
Yes,
believe that.
Craig.
Are you ready for a motion?
I certainly am.
Okay, I'd like to make a motion that we approve the ordinance of the approving and accepting the deed of conservation easement for the 2250 Emma Road property.
I'll second that.
I have a motion. I have a second. Any further comments from the board? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Thank you, thank you. Good to
Thank
see you.
you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Sarah.
Thank
Thanks,
you,
Paul.
guys.
Nice to see you.
How are your folks
See
for
you
us?
too. Thanks. You guys are going to get out early today.
I know, we're working on it.
Yeah, that remains to be seen.
I'm working on it. Okay, we have one more item on our agenda. We should have staff here. We should have
Excuse me,
Jordana and Larissa.
Patty, if I could, Paul?
Paul?
There's one on the signature page on page 81 of our packet. It has my name on there.
As chair?
And that needs to be made correct.
Okay.
Either that or we'll just let Steve
It
sign.
was like a boilerplate thing probably from some earlier date when I
I'm
was
sure.
chairman.
Back in the
Yeah.
day.
I'll double check that. We'll
All right,
Yeah.
thank
Oh,
you.
yeah, there it
Thank
is.
you.
All right, I don't see any members of staff here,
Online?
but we're,
Are we early? Maybe they think we're early.
No, I think we were getting mixed up when Charlotte was on vacation, not getting invites. If you remember the first time Jordana was identified as me on the
well,
Zoom
this
meeting.
is a second reading,
Right.
public hearing.
We've been through it.
We have been through it.
It's pretty clean. I'm gonna move it forward. I don't think we need staff to present unless we have questions. We'll either wait, take a break, or, so does the board have any questions as to this? It was the addition of Snowmass Village to, also, to clarify with this intergovernmental agreement, we're amending it.
Here's Jordana.
Jordana
Hi,
just popped on.
Jordana. So I'm doing a presentation that this was brought back because Snowmass Village, we're so grateful and thankful, are joining in our vital mental health services issue with our amended intergovernmental agreement. And I'm assuming there are no changes from first reading?
No changes.
Okay. Is there anything else you would like to add?
Nothing has changed, but this is the IGA that allows us to come together with all of the partners to purchase vital mental health services in a coordinated way.
Okay, and Kelly has a question.
Yeah, do we go out on RFP on this on a regular interim?
It's actually, we just went out for RFP again on it, and the RFP closed on Friday, and the proposals are currently being reviewed.
Okay, so
Good
you'll keep
question.
us up to date. Thank you.
So this is a public hearing, so I'm going to open this item on our agenda to the public, seeing no one in the room, and I do not believe we have anyone online, but we'll give anyone who wants to jump online or run into the room to comment on this item. And I do have to make a comment about Greg's screen behind him. It looks like you're coming out of the earth. If you move your coffee cup.
It does.
It's like you're a
yes, it does.
it's like you're a headstone in a graveyard.
It's like one of those Easter Island guys.
Yeah. And the elf behind you are going, what the heck is that guy doing out there? I had to make a comment, Greg. Okay, seeing no one from the public during our moment of humor, I'm going to close the public hearing and bring it back to the board.
I'll make
So
a motion.
I have a question actually for Jordana. So the town of Snowmass Village allocation is $80,000 based on the 2022 funding levels. Does this 80,000, is this increasing the total amount available, or are the other entities' amount being decreased because of the town of Snowmass Village allocation?
Great question. So historically, there haven't been changes to the amounts that the other parties have been contributing to this contract, even though we still have savings every year. So this town of Snowmass Village is adding contributions based off of what they have been taking in from their tobacco tax revenue. So they are contributing that to this effort. And because we are starting a new RFP process, and we'll have potentially new contractors starting January 1st, 2023. There might be, our goal is to have additional services that we'll be able to contract for, and that the cost will actually increase. We also have this starting in January. What we've been hearing is there's a real desire to have more leadership from the county to improve coordination as well as to collect more data. So Lindsay Naish, the Director of Human Services, and myself will be spearheading that leadership effort from the county to really have everyone who is awarded a contract through the Vital Mental Health Services participate in this mental health access program. So not only are the services being provided, but that there's more coordination, care coordination, referrals, and data being collected, so we can better understand the needs in our community and help inform future RFPs.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, good question. Kelly, you wanted to make a motion.
Yes. Let me pull up the, okay, I'll make a motion to approve the resolution of the BOCC approving an amended intergovernmental agreement between BOCC of Pickens County, Aspen School District, Aspen Valley Hospital, City of Aspen, and Town of Snowmass Village for the purchase of vital mental health services.
A second.
I have a motion, I have a second. Do I have any further comment?
My further comment would just be that this is for addressing vital mental health services, and it'll be to address gaps in the mental health care system of care. At some point, I don't feel comfortable that I know enough about what the gaps are, so I am a little concerned about this. I'm going to vote for it, but once again, we're increasing the cost of this. We're bringing more money in. I just want to understand exactly where it's going to go at some point, and I don't know if that's a conversation we can have now, but I want to red flag it.
I
Thank
felt
you.
like we had a really thorough presentation about the mental health in the valley and the lack of resources, and we had tons of numbers.
It's possible that we did, and I'm not remembering all the details, so it's just
Did we,
maybe it's been
Jordana?
that long.
Am I making that up?
Okay, thank you.
Chelsea came back to share the community mental health survey with the BOCC that was conducted, the results of which helped to inform this RFP process. And then, Greg, I think that there might be more information to share after there's a decision on what services will be funded in 2023. And we can figure out the best way to keep the BOCC involved, whether it's coming for a presentation during a work session, or maybe even having some of those that are awarded the contract present on what they're doing and their services. That might be of interest as well.
Thank you. That would make me feel better. Thank
Yeah,
you.
that's what I was gonna suggest, once we award the contract, and we know what those gaps are filling, who's filling them and with what, then that would be a great time for that conversation. So thank you, good question.
Yeah, it seems to me that presentation we had was mostly about what we're lacking. You know what I mean? Like, all these people need help and we don't have any services. It was pretty shocking, as I recall, when I
Well, or
watched
the
it.
word wasn't getting out there with the services that are available and how people can get in touch with them, so there was a lot of issues. So I do have a motion and a second. Seeing no other questions or concerns? I'll call the question. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Thank you, and I do believe I opened and
Thanks,
closed
Jordana.
the public hearing, so. Okay, thank you. So, board, we are moving on to open discussion. I know that Rich had a few from yesterday, but before we get there, we have a letter before us to the Honorable Senator Michael Bennett regarding the proposed Star Peak Wilderness including that in the GORP, which is the Gunnison Outdoor Resources Protection Act. And this is partially, most of it is in Gunny. Does any of it run into Pitkin, or it's up the Pro Pass area? I think it's appropriate for Pitkin County to weigh in. I think the letter is very concise and clear. The only question I personally have is, does the rest of the board, would the rest of the board like to sign on to this, or just have the chair?
I have a question.
Yeah.
I'm just confused a little bit about this, the recommendation. I don't know a lot about this. Just where it says pulling back the wilderness boundary to Star Pass will ensure that highly valued winter motorized recreation remains open. So does that mean we're shrinking the wilderness area? Or, which I didn't think allowed motorized rec, or expanding it? I'm confused. Steve has his hand up. Do you know?
So, and I've been involved in other wilderness designations where non-conforming uses were removed from the wilderness proposal. And that's the case with here, to pull the boundary up to Star Pass, which leaves the Friends Hut out of the wilderness boundary, because it would be a non-conforming use in a wilderness area. And that's what the thing about it's not more than 50 years old, so it wouldn't be, they wouldn't consider it a historic building in the wilderness area. They did the same thing, pulled the boundary back over by the Crested Butte Nordic Center to keep the Nordic Center trails out of the wilderness boundary proposal.
So this area is being included in the GORP Act, and they're asking that how it's included currently in the GORP Act, the boundary be pulled back to not interfere with the historic uses that surround and
Yeah,
probably.
and I have a feeling that by pulling it back to Star Pass, it probably is putting it on the county line, and so very likely none of Pitkin County would be included in the wilderness area boundary.
That help, Kelly?
Yeah, I think I just want to look into it before I add my name, if you're gonna individually.
Yeah,
sign.
so would we rather just wait and have this before us and gather more information as to what that paragraph means?
Wish we
Does
had
it mean
somebody
we're
here
gonna be
to talk about it.
incentivizing more winterized use up there? Or are we gonna, what does that mean in this? That's a good
Who's
question.
been your contact, Greg?
Well, Will Roush. Yeah, it was Will Roush
So-
at Wilderness Workshop.
So this means that snowmobiles can go to the Friends Hut? Is that what you're saying, Steve?
We don't
By
know.
pulling it back?
Well, I don't know what the travel management plan from the Forest Service is, whether that's in a snowmobiling area or not, I don't know.
Well, the thing is if it's designated wilderness, kind of throws out the travel management plan to no motorized vehicles. So if we could get clarification, do you want to contact Will?
I was thinking
Yeah. I kind of want to wrap this meeting up quickly because I've had other things to do, but is there a timeliness to it right this moment?
Can we bring it back next Tuesday?
I think we're gonna have to bring it back Tuesday.
Yeah,
Actually, Wednesday. Let's bring it back Wednesday.
I'm reading Will Roush's email to Ellen Ciceno, and it doesn't have a deadline in here.
It just seems like if
So-
we're pulling the wilderness area
Is
back
Ellen
away
available?
from Lindley Huts, it's not
Can
guaranteeing
we get-
quiet around Lindley Hut. So it seems like a,
We can do it next
seems
week.
confusing
I get
that
it.
Yeah,
Okay.
and you think that Will would be promoting,
something.
Yeah, and
Not
I
be
mean,
promoting.
I can understand if it's like a compromised, negotiated language.
It's
but
too, it's
so if you want to reach out to Will and bring it back to us on Wednesday, the 8th, 9th,
gonna
in
reach out
open
to Will?
discussion? Okay. Kelly's gonna reach out to Will since it's her question.
Okay. So the highly valued winter motorized recreation remains open? That doesn't sound like wilderness workshop language to me.
Yeah, so let's just clarify that. We have time on Wednesday, so at least we've got the conversation moving forward. Okay, Rich, did you have some quick things? Because, Kelly, you can always go if you need to.
Oh, it's okay. I just.
Rich?
Sure, I'm punting some of mine to Phyllis, who's in the room with you, but one that I wanted to talk to you about is that the Airport Advisory Board bylaws state that the BOCC will support the board's needs, the Airport Advisory Board's needs to appoint subcommittees or special task force committees from time to time, and that those appointments would be reviewed and approved by the BOCC prior to seating. So this falls in line with a couple of comments you made today about safety, GA safety. At the last board meeting, Barry Vaughn had approached the committee about setting up a subcommittee made up of some members of the board and then also some local pilots. And they want to take on the safety side of things. So it would be really related to training, just kind of getting a feel from the local pilots on the GA, kind of what's missing, see if there's some policies that could be put in place that could come back to the Airport Advisory Board for recommendation and then eventually on to you all. And the board supported forming that subcommittee. And I've got some names here that I just want to throw out and just check in with the board. Barry would go out and just make sure there's interest from these individuals sitting on this. We could come back and get a formal document, I guess, appointing those members. It doesn't say we need to. I think just make sure you guys are okay with it here, but we can certainly go either route, your preference. But the names that we're looking at is Bruce Gordon, who is already on the board, along with Mike Salandas. Both of them are local pilots. And then the last time you interviewed individuals and appointed Barry, there was two gentlemen, Peter Hutter and William Landis, that you all were pretty
liked,
I guess, convinced that they were good. I mean, you got a great slate of candidates. So I believe you had asked us if there was ever opportunities to get them involved. So this would be one of those. John McBride has reached out from time to time, dealing with the GA side of things. And then there's three others. There's Steve Vance, who is a local pilot, Tyson Weiss, who is connected to the GA private side of things, not so much on the pilot end, but the association. And then also recently, I think it's Captain Detweiler, had recently retired. And I think, Patty, you had mentioned, boy, he'd be a good one to reach out to. So those are the individuals that we would like to see about just putting on an ad hoc kind of a subcommittee, keep it really specific to the safety. We'll be monitoring that, advising that if there's anything that if it strays into something that they may have conflicts, we'll certainly monitor that, make sure that they don't cross over into things they shouldn't be chatting about. So, but this is an opportunity to start looking at maybe some ideas and thoughts from the pilots that we could bring forward for consideration to improve safety there.
Yeah, and I totally support this. And as far as retired Captain Detweiler, he's the one who created the pilot safety training program for the SkyWest pilots coming in and out of here. I will send you on his contact information just to see. I'm not sure what his availability is these days since he's retired, but he may just be a good point person. Because he's been there, done that. So I'll get that out to you. Does the board want to see a formal list? Or I think maybe after Barry reaches out and knows who's interested or not, we can fine tune. I don't want it to be too many members that how difficult that can be. But if you can bring us back some kind of final list maybe for the board to actually have in front of us. Is that okay with the board?
I'd be happy to do that, if that's your.
Okay.
Thank them for marching forward.
Yes, we like this. This
It'd be great to reach out to them. I agree. Thank you.
It's exciting, and I appreciate your support on this. I mean, it's things are starting to move. So
I'll send that info off to you ASAP.
Thank you, Patty.
Okay, and
that's all I had, and the rest I funded on to Phyllis.
Okay. Phyllis?
Did you injure your hand or have carpal tunnel surgery or something?
Oh, trigger finger again.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I've had 6. I got only a few more to go. So.
No, then your toes. Don't forget. Did they mention your toes?
Oh, yeah.
I've had that also. Condolences.
Thank you. Appreciate it, Francie.
Okay, we're going over to Phyllis.
Okay, easy ones. We distributed the 2023 holiday schedule, so those will be the days that the
Do we have to formally approve that like we have in the past?
You don't, for 2 reasons. One, we found in the Home Rule Charter, it says any holidays that the state of Colorado identifies by statute are county holidays, and then we have a policy that identifies some of the other ones, like the day after Thanksgiving.
Okay.
The state of Colorado does recognize the day after Thanksgiving, or
They
not?
do not.
But we do.
But we do in our policy. But that's how we ended up with Francis Xavier Cabrini Day, because the state in statute made that a state holiday. So that's how we ended up with that one.
Any comment from the board on holidays?
Just, I think that would probably be Javier.
You are correct.
So
that's what I have glasses on, but I saw the X.
I like Xavier myself, but that's what I thought it was. Very good.
It is spelled X with an X, is correct.
Still Javier.
But I still think it's Javier.
All right, so we're good on that one?
It's Italian.
Okay, guys,
so
let's
it's
bring it.
different.
It is very Italian.
Okay.
Holiday
We're
party.
figuring this, aren't we?
Steve, I know you asked about that. That is Saturday, December 10th from 6 to 9 p.m. It will be in Carbondale this year.
Holy mackerel.
Back to our, we had always tried to have a pattern of an Up Valley and a Down Valley holiday party, and we've been Up Valley for quite a few years.
Where's it going to be in Carbondale?
I believe at the Carbondale Rec Center.
Interesting.
What happens in Carbondale stays in Carbondale. Just want y'all to
So
know that.
the reason it's the same night as one of the Messiah rehearsals, not rehearsals, performances in Glenwood Springs. So I would be late getting there, but
It's
since
only
it's
in
in
Carbondale.
it makes it doable.
Yeah, awesome.
So we'll be receiving more email information as to.
You will. There'll be an invitation with a save the date, so everybody knows that.
And are we getting any arrangements with local hotels in Carbondale for those of us who might not want to travel back up Valley?
I will find that out from our tardy.
There's a wonderful bus service from
And
Carbondale.
Rosa is part of
I
that
have
group.
to take 2 buses to get home on a
So the answer
stormy
is
night
yes?
after cocktails. I don't know.
Okay.
We're working on it?
Yep.
Okay, thank you.
They are.
Thank you. Okay, what else?
CCI, if you're planning to attend, please let Charlotte and Lainey know. Those dates, we have a meeting on the 13th, which is a special meeting to approve the budget. So for people who are going to CCI, we're going to be looking for a virtual attendance so we can get the budget passed.
And we've left that day pretty free. I already told the board this, so
Yeah.
we can move the time. If you guys look at the conference schedule, and the afternoon is better, we need to know ASAP for noticing. Greg and I think, will be Zooming, and Stephen and Francie, I think, are going. Kelly hasn't decided, but I think we can get 3 of us because it's the final.
But so nobody will be here.
Final
for
budget.
everything.
Well, it's Greg and I will be here.
Oh, I thought you said we'd be Zooming. You said
No,
we'll be
you
here.
will be Zooming.
Yeah.
I see.
Okay, so we're gonna work on coordinating that, but if you plan to attend, let Charlotte and Lainey know. PTO cash out. Finance department.
That's paid time off, catch out.
Thank you.
Cash
All those letters. We do provide employees to be able to cash out up to 80 hours of their bank of paid time off. And that usually happens when people start reaching their maximum, and at that point they no longer accrue any. Finance is proposing that we allow for another 80 hours this year as a one-time special cash out. At a particular time, they're going to need to submit paperwork by November 23rd. It'll be paid out by December 9th on that paycheck. And it's because of the amount of high balances we have right now. And part of that's due to the amount of vacancies we have and people not being able to take time off. We still want to encourage people to take time off and use their PTO to get relief from being at work. But we feel this is a one-time occurrence. PTO is a liability to the county, so it's owned by the employees. So when someone leaves, they get paid out for it anyway. So this would be allow people to reduce their balances for a one-time occurrence. And we are making it very clear this is a one-time occurrence for this
We
special
have that,
cash
that could
out.
be a significant amount of money.
Because of the balance that we have, the finance department is recommending that this is okay, and Connie and her budget awareness.
We always have to carry it in our reserve anyway.
Correct.
It's already budgeted for the total amount of PTO people have collected.
So what does that mean? Could you explain that? What does PTO stand for?
Paid time off.
Okay, so that would be like they're due so many days off and they don't take them.
Correct.
And so now they can cash out for those days they didn't take.
Because there's a maximum they can keep in their bank, and then they can't accrue anymore.
And we are requiring people, I believe it's 40 hours that you have to keep in your bank. You can't reduce your balance less than 40 hours. So people can still have time off, as well as sick time, because we do not have sick time anymore. We only have paid time off.
And how many paid days off does a full-time employee get?
Ooh, now that they're all combined,
And it depends on your tenure.
yeah.
The longer you're here, you get.
And because we rolled it all in with sick leave, we used to get 10 days of sick leave a year, and so we rolled it all in together. And then the maximum got extended and increased, but we still, between COVID, we have people with high balances, and finance is just looking at the number of people we have and brought this to our attention.
By balances, you mean people who haven't taken their time off?
And have accrued it. So there's a maximum accrual level, which is, I think it's somewhere like, it's different, like Kelly said, at the different levels of tenure.
Well, we got 10 days off at my last job, including sick and personal days. And if you didn't take them, too bad for you.
Well, and I think it should be noted that a lot of the reason, and I know people have been, because we haven't had staffing for people to take time off, but a lot of times people are taking time off but taking work with them. So they're not using their paid time off. They're traveling with their iPad or their laptop, so they're going back home to see mom, but they're working while they're there. And so they're not using their paid time off, which I'm concerned about.
It was way harder to write sub-directions.
Yeah, I'm concerned about that because it's not, and I know that there's some people who haven't taken any time away, but there are some people who, and they rightfully could do so, took time away but worked. So they continued to accrue their paid time off. And now we're cashing that out for them, which is also something we can do for them. And especially in this time of inflation and with the holidays coming up, the time frame, this is your one-time opportunity. And, if we do have it in the budget, like Kelly said, there's so much we have to have in reserve. But this is, I would like to know what the final amount will be, because I think it's going to be significant.
We will let you know.
Thank you.
As well as, what is cashed out through the year.
Yeah.
I mean, we currently allow for 80 hours, so that's happening. And this is a one-time. If someone misses the application, this is a one-time. This is the date. Finance is recommending it. They're also recommending the process because it's a lot of work to go through.
And especially since finance right now is understaffed, so.
They are.
Yeah.
They just had another person start this week, so.
Okay,
yeah,
that's good to
return.
hear.
All right, that is my last one.
Does the board have any other? Steve, please.
I have located a map of the Star Peak Wilderness. There is quite a substantial part of it in Picken County, running from the Pearl Pass Road over to the, what was the Iron Mine Road is called the Copper Fork Road. The Lindley Hut, I can see the Lindley Hut is excluded from it, but there is a pretty big amount of land that is in Picken County.
Surprised we weren't contacted sooner if there's so much Picken County land in there. Interesting.
And it's the only part of the GORP proposal that includes anything in Picken
Yeah.
County.
I think they would have had to have our joining in on that before now, but
Will Rouse just responded to my text to him, and he said he can give Ellen a call. I did ask him if he would be willing to call us now, thinking we could get it over with, but Kelly wants to leave, so let's just put it off.
we have
till
time. We have
Wednesday.
time on the next meeting, which is on Wednesday the 9th.
Okay,
I do
great.
believe,
We'll
but
just do it
that's
then.
not a heavy. We'll
No
figure it
rush.
out.
I would like to give it its attention due.
Yes, I think that makes
Yeah, I
sense.
think we
due
should publish,
manner.
we should print, they have a really good map on their website. We need to
There's that
print
much
it out
property
so
in
we can
Picken
actually
County. We
look
should have
at-
probably been on board with this from the get-go. But that being said, we need to move forward with it now.
Okay.
There's a lot of things going on.
All right, anything else from the board? No? Okay, you know what we need now? We need a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
I got a motion, I have a second. Any further comment? All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Again, it was great to have everybody in the room today. Thank you, Grassroots. Thank you, Rosa. We
Anybody
appreciate it.
ever said no?